Eric Lawson and Miguel Torres, Nathan Crowley, 5 years apart, in 5 different cities, each vanished after a night out, each found dead in water, each case ruled an accident, but they had more in common than bad luck. They were all young, fit, promising men with no reason to die, and near every one of their bodies, a smiley face was spray-painted, grinning like a signature left behind. These aren't coincidences. This is a pattern. And if the signs are right, the smiley face killers are still out there. In the winter of 2012, Eric Lawson was just weeks away from graduating college. At 22 years old, he was respected by his peers, popular among his professors, and preparing to start a new job in the tech industry. On a freezing Friday night in January, Eric joined a few friends at a downtown Minneapolis bar to celebrate a classmate's birthday. The night was typical drinks, music, laughter, but what happened after he left that bar would become the start of a mystery that still haunts the city. Eric told his friends he was going to walk home alone. It wasn't unusual. He only lived 10 minutes away, and he had done it before. But this time, he never arrived. The next morning, his roommate noticed his bed hadn't been slept in. Calls to Eric's phone went straight to voicemail. His friends assumed he had crashed at someone else's place. But as the hours passed and no one heard from him, concern turned into panic. By that evening, a missing persons report was filed. Police initially treated it as a routine disappearance, common among college students who might go off the radar for a day or two, but Eric wasn't the type to vanish without warning. He was reliable, rarely drank to excess, and had plans to meet his parents that weekend. As snow piled up on the streets, flyers with his face were plastered across the city. Students organized search parties. Drones scanned rooftops and alleyways. Nothing turned up. After 6 days, a city maintenance crew spotted something in the icy waters of the Mississippi River. It was Eric's body, caught near a bend downstream from where he'd last been seen. An autopsy found no signs of trauma. His blood alcohol content was high, and police ruled it an accidental drowning. The case was closed, but questions remained. Eric was a strong swimmer. He had been captain of his high school swim team. His route home didn't take him anywhere near the river, unless he had taken a long, unnecessary detour. And then there was the text. At 1:17 a.m., about 30 minutes before he vanished, Eric had messaged a friend. Something feels off. No one knew what he meant. Shortly after his body was found, a small, crude smiley face was discovered, spray-painted on a wall near the riverbank. At first, it seemed like meaningless graffiti. But for one local retired detective, it triggered a memory. Years ago, he had worked on a similar case. Another drowning, another smiley face. Back then, he had dismissed it as coincidence. Now, it felt like something more. Eric Lawson's death might have faded into the long list of unexplained tragedies if not for that symbol, quiet, mocking, and almost hidden in plain sight. The kind of detail most people would ignore, but as time would show, this wasn't an isolated event. Eric's story was just the beginning of a chilling pattern that stretched far beyond Minneapolis and far beyond anything anyone imagined. As the months passed after Eric Lawson's death, life on his college campus slowly returned to normal. Students moved on, classes continued, and new faces arrived. But beneath the surface, unease lingered. A few of Eric's friends couldn't let go of the strange details surrounding his disappearance, the random route toward the river, the chilling text, and most of all, the smiley face spray-painted nearby. When one of them stumbled across an old internet forum discussing similar cases, everything changed. It began with an eerie sense of recognition. The forum was filled with reports of young men, usually between the ages of 20 and 30, who had disappeared after nights out drinking. In every case, the victims were considered intelligent, athletic, and responsible. Each of them was eventually found dead in water rivers, canals, lakes, and in many of those cases, there were smiley face drawings or graffiti located nearby. Sometimes crude, sometimes artistic, but always disturbing in context. A few former detectives had taken notice too. Back in the early 2000s, retired NYPD detective Kevin Gannon and his partner Anthony Duarte started investigating a string of mysterious drownings across multiple states. They noticed the same details repeating: young men vanishing under similar circumstances, only to be found dead in bodies of water days or even weeks later. Many had no signs of injury or struggle. Officially, most were ruled accidents, but Gannon and Duarte believed something far more sinister was happening. They began to piece together what they called the smiley face killers theory. The idea was that a group, not an individual was targeting specific men across the country. These weren't random acts of violence, they argued, but carefully orchestrated murders designed to look like accidents. The smiley faces were the signature, left like a calling card for anyone paying close enough attention. Skepticism came quickly. Law enforcement agencies dismissed the theory, pointing out that the smiley face was one of the most common pieces of graffiti in the world. They argued that the pattern was more coincidence than conspiracy. Without forensic evidence linking the cases, there was no proof of foul play. Most departments chose not to reopen investigations, but the bodies kept turning up. In Pittsburgh, a college senior named Nathan Crowley went missing after a St. Patrick's Day celebration. His body was found a week later in the Ohio River. In Chicago, another young man disappeared from a music festival and was discovered in the river near Lower Wacker Drive. Both had similar toxicology results. Traces of alcohol and GHB, a drug commonly used in assaults. Both had no clear cause of death. And again, in both cities, smiley faces appeared close to where the bodies had been recovered. As more cases came to light, the online community began to map them. A digital trail formed a strange web connecting dozens of victims across different states, all fitting the same profile, all meeting the same end. For the people who believed in the theory, the message was clear. These weren't drownings. These were calculated, coordinated killings. And whoever was behind them was still out there, hiding in the open, grinning in the shadows. In 2016, something happened that shook the narrative surrounding the smiley face killer's theory. For the first time in years, someone survived. Miguel Torres was a 24-year-old software developer from Milwaukee, recently hired by a major tech company. He was quiet, reserved, and deeply focused on his work. One night in early March, he attended a coworker's birthday party in a trendy warehouse-turned event space downtown. He wasn't known to be a heavy drinker, and according to those present, he stuck to a couple of beers and spent most of the evening chatting near the food table. At around 11:45 p.m., Miguel left the party. Security camera footage captured him, exiting the building and walking down a side street toward the bus stop. Then, he disappeared. The next morning, he didn't show up for work. Friends tried calling and texting, but his phone went unanswered. Hours turned into days. Police initiated a search, retracing his last known steps, but nothing surfaced. It wasn't until the evening of the second day that a jogger spotted Miguel wandering along the banks of the Milwaukee River, barefoot and confused. He was brought to the hospital, suffering from hypothermia and minor cuts to his feet and legs. He had no memory of what had happened to him. According to doctors, he was dehydrated and had likely spent hours exposed to the cold. His blood alcohol content was low, suggesting he hadn't been drinking heavily. What troubled the doctors more were the strange burns on his left shoulder, raw red, and roughly shaped like a smeared smiley face. Authorities questioned Miguel, hoping for a break in what was being whispered about in certain circles as a potential smiley face killer's encounter. But he couldn't offer much. His last clear memory was waiting near the bus stop and seeing a dark-colored van slowly driving by. The next thing he recalled was waking up near the riverbank, freezing and in pain. Toxicology tests revealed trace amounts of GHB in his system, just enough to cause memory loss, but not enough to kill. The discovery reignited discussions about the theory. Until now, every victim had been found dead. Miguel's survival was the first real crack in the mysterious pattern. Investigators revisited similar cases in the area, including the death of a local university student found in the river 2 years earlier. Near the spot where Miguel had emerged from the woods, graffiti had been freshly sprayed on a utility box, a clean white smiley face, grinning without context. Despite the obvious signs, officials were reluctant to connect the dots. They released a statement calling Miguel's incident an isolated event, possibly but those who had followed the pattern knew better. The matching drug in his system, the same type of victim profile, the similar location, and the ever-present smiley face, it was all too familiar. Miguel had escaped something. What exactly? He couldn't say, but his survival offered a terrifying confirmation. The killers were real, and for reasons unknown, they had let one of their targets live. By 2018, the theory of the smiley face killers had evolved from a fringe internet conspiracy into something more serious, thanks in large part to the efforts of a private investigator named Lena Rowe. A former homicide analyst turned independent researcher, Lena had spent the better part of 6 years quietly collecting information on cases that fit the familiar mold: young, fit men disappearing after nights out, found days or weeks later in nearby bodies of water, their deaths written off as accidents. But to Lena, it was no coincidence. There was a pattern, and she was determined to prove it. Her investigation covered 45 deaths across 11 states. She poured through police reports, autopsy results, toxicology screens, and crime scene photos. What she uncovered was disturbing. In 38 of the 45 cases, there were unexplained gaps in time between the last sighting of the victims and the discovery of their bodies. Some had been missing for weeks, yet their remains showed little to no A few even had fully intact stomach contents that suggested they had eaten only hours before their deaths despite being missing for days. The most consistent clue was toxicology. In many cases, GHB was detected just small traces, often dismissed or overlooked. It is a drug known for its sedative properties and is difficult to detect after a short period. Lena noted that many of the victims had no prior history with drugs or heavy drinking. She suspected they were being drugged, abducted, and kept alive before being murdered and placed in the water post-mortem. It was a horrifying possibility that redefined how these deaths were being interpreted. Even more chilling were the messages. In one case, a student's jacket was discovered miles from where his body was found. In the inside pocket was a torn piece of notebook paper with the letters SFK written in block capitals. Police dismissed it as meaningless, but Lena disagreed. It looked like a signature, a confirmation. Smiley face killers. The initials were too on the nose to ignore, and yet the lack of forensic evidence meant law enforcement remained silent. Lena compiled her findings into a comprehensive report and shared it with local and federal authorities. She didn't expect much. What she hoped for was public awareness. She began speaking at conferences and uploading anonymized case breakdowns online. Her work caught the attention of several crime-focused podcasts and documentaries. As her voice grew louder, so did the threats. She began receiving anonymous emails, warning her to stop digging. Once, she found her car tires slashed outside her apartment. Another time, her home office had been broken into, though nothing was stolen. Still, she persisted. In a taped interview, Lena explained what kept her going. If this really is an organized network of killers, they're counting on the world to look away. They're counting on people to believe these were just accidents. And all the while, the smiley faces kept showing up beneath bridges, on sewer grates, spray painted on abandoned buildings, always close to water, always close to death. To some, it was a symbol of coincidence. To Lena, it was a message written in plain sight. In 2023, the case of the smiley face killers reached a new, terrifying chapter. A popular true crime podcast, The Dark Web, decided to dive into the mystery, bringing it back into the public eye with a series of well-researched episodes. The hosts, investigative journalists with a deep knowledge of criminal psychology and unsolved cases, began to unravel a trail that spanned more than a decade. Their team spent months contacting families, reviewing autopsy reports, and speaking with experts who believed, like Lena Rowe, that the smiley face killers were not an urban legend but a chilling reality. As the podcast gained traction, the hosts began receiving anonymous tips and unsettling messages. Then, one day, the host, Claire Reynolds, received a package at the station. It was small, wrapped in plain brown paper, with no return address. Inside was a single, glossy photograph, a picture of 5 young men standing on a dock beside a lake. All of them were smiling, casually dressed, and appeared to be in their 20s, just like many of the victims. Their faces, although somewhat blurry due to the age of the photograph, were unmistakable in their familiarity. On the back of the photo, in dark red ink, were the words, "Thanks for noticing." The cryptic message sent a shiver down Claire's spine. She immediately handed the photo over to her team, who quickly began researching the background of the men in the image. Within hours, they discovered that all 5 individuals had gone missing in separate incidents, all over the past decade. Each had been found dead in water, and each case had been classified as an accidental drowning, no foul play suspected. But as the team combed through the details, a horrifying pattern emerged. All 5 men had been seen near the water, with no real explanation for why they would end up there. And, once again, the smiley face appeared in each of their cases, spray-painted nearby, often on a wall, sometimes on a bench or a street lamp, never far from the water where their bodies were discovered, in a twist that seemed almost too surreal to believe. The location of the photo in Clara's Hansel Lake, where the 5 men had once stood, was revealed to be an abandoned quarry in upstate New York. It had long been rumored to be a popular hangout for local teenagers and young adults. Curious about the connection, Claire's team arranged for a dive team to search the area, hoping to uncover some clue that would bring new light to the cases. They found nothing at first, just murky water and old debris. However, a few days later, another discovery was made, this time not in the water, but in the woods surrounding the quarry. Divers had missed it earlier, but a hiker found an old, rusted sign on the ground. The sign, once used to mark a construction site, had been vandalized with a large, perfectly drawn smiley face. Beneath it, written in what appeared to be fresh paint, were the words, "It's not over." The authorities were notified immediately, and the FBI was brought in. However, no further leads appeared. The case continued to stall, leaving many to wonder if the killers were still active. For those who had followed the story closely, the message was clear. The smiley face killers were still out there, taunting authorities and watching from the shadows. The authorities may have closed many of the cases, but the killers had left a chilling reminder that they were still playing their game. The question wasn't just about who they were, but when they would strike again and if anyone would be able to stop them. Before another victim became part of the twisted pattern, the smiley face, once an innocent symbol of joy, had become the haunting emblem of a criminal network that seemed to be just out of reach.